to your Puget Sound PCS channel. Over the past few episodes, we've tried to share some content that will help with some of the decisions you will be making when considering relocating to the Puget Sound or to a Puget Sound PCS. Topics like creating wealth using your VA benefits, whether you should live on base or off base, where's the best place to live near or around JBLM or Bremerton or Kitsap Naval Bases. We interviewed an active duty soldier who tells why he loved JBLM and the Pacific Northwest. And today I'm interviewing a friend and lender who is no stranger to the VA loan process. Eric Carlson is with NFM Mortgage, but his story best comes from him. Well, thanks, Eric, so much for participating in this interview. As I mentioned to you before, our audience are military families who are moving from one of the other bases in the U.S. to the Puget Sound area, either JBLM or one of the naval stations in Bremerton or the Kitsap Peninsula. So, because most of the military folks that are looking for off-base housing are first-time homebuyers and trying to take advantage of their VA benefits, there's a lot of questions that come up. I don't know, it's the most significant, as you know, it's the most significant decision they're probably ever going to make, right?
Absolutely.
That and getting married.
Yes.
And there's a lot of things to consider. So one of the things that I keep getting asked is, so how much can I afford? How much house can I afford to buy?
That is a great question. There's a lot of things that go into that, right? The type of loan program, if you're using a VA loan specifically, VA actually allows us to go higher. You can afford more house in a lot of cases with a VA loan with little or nothing down, which is amazing. It's an incredible program. There's no other loan like it. The payments are lower on a VA loan typically. The interest rates are great. You don't have to have an amazing credit score to qualify, and they usually allow you to buy a lot more house because the payments are lower, rates lower, things like that. So it's a great program all around. That, I mean, if you're in the military and you have that eligibility, it's one of the most amazing benefits you have.
So what does the process look like? What does the application process look like?
The application process to a lot of people sounds really daunting, and it tends to be like probably everybody's least favorite part of the home buying process, right? Like there's documentation that you have to provide, and that sounds daunting, and you have to fill stuff out. It's actually not as hard as most people probably think it is in their head. The application actually only takes maybe 10 minutes to fill out, and it's really simple stuff like what's your name, what's your date of birth, where do you live, how much do you make, how long have you been in the military, stuff like that. So the questions are really common sense. You can do it from your phone, which is amazing. You don't even have to fill it out on a piece of paper these days or even talk to me in person. You could do it, laying in your bed at 10 o'clock at night. It only takes, again, like 10 minutes, and you can actually upload a lot of the documentation that's required in the process as well, which isn't that bad. A lot of the stuff we can even help you get online. In some cases, we can help you find your tax returns if those are needed. We can do verifications of employment online electronically for you. We can look at your bank statements online if you're comfortable with that. So you don't even have to provide that stuff. So it's actually a lot easier than people make it out to be, and it doesn't take nearly as long as they think it does.
Awesome. So what's the difference between buying a home through the VA loan process or the VA benefit program as opposed to a traditional loan like conventional or FHA or some of the other more traditional programs?
The biggest thing with the VA loans are that you don't have to come up with a down payment. Most other loans require that you come up with something out of your pocket for like a down payment. Those loans typically, like on an FHA loan, which is another type of government guaranteed loan, require at least 3.5%. And on a $400,000 or $500,000 home purchase, that could be 15 grand fairly easily.
Sure.
So VA allowing you to buy a house with literally nothing down. Like if you were to go rent a house or an apartment somewhere, you have to come up with first and last month's rent and a deposit, and that could be 5 or 6 grand at the end of the day.
That's
VA allows you to go buy your own house with literally nothing.
that's a good
There's
point.
some things that you'll want to come up with in the process. You want to do an inspection, which is fairly cheap. That could be what, 3, 4, 500 bucks or something like
Right,
that.
right,
That's fairly inexpensive. And there are closing costs. Closing costs are fees that the buyer ultimately is responsible for in taking out a mortgage loan. But in a lot of cases, we can get the seller to pay that for you. So literally, you can get into a house with as little as 3, 4, 500 bucks for the cost of the inspection, just to make sure your house isn't infested with termites or something like that.
sure. We're gonna cover the inspection processes in another video, but so what are some of the closing costs that we all have to deal with? What do they include?
Closing costs are really divided into two parts. One of them are quote unquote hard costs, and those are costs, mostly third party costs that you incur. Excuse me. You have to pay somebody to do that appraisal. Like they have to go out, look at the house, make sure it's worth what you're paying for it. So you got to pay. They want to get paid. They're an independent party. They're doing work. They want to get paid for that stuff. There's a title company that insures the house against liens, which you might cover at some point. We won't dive into that right now, but we've got to pay
Right.
those people to do that stuff, to provide that insurance. And then the escrow company, there's a neutral independent company called an escrow company that helps facilitate the transaction. The buyer will see those people specifically most of the time in person when they sign the paperwork at the end of the process. So they want to get paid to facilitate that transaction. So that encompasses maybe 60% of the closing cost. Another 40%, or the escrow, our escrow fees and things that we collect on the buyer's behalf to pay for them. Homeowners insurance being one of those things. We basically have to collect a year of homeowners insurance plus a couple extra months up front. We're paying that for you out of your monthly payment. VA requires it. But we have to collect a large chunk of that up front. But that's really something for your benefit, on your behalf, that we're doing that. There's insurance and your property taxes. Every county requires that you pay property taxes if you own a home. Depending on where that's at, how much the home is worth, or how much they assess it for, we've got to collect a certain amount of months up front for the property taxes to pay those, again, on your behalf. So all those are grouped into closing costs. 40% of those fees are really things that we're paying for you that aren't, direct loan costs per se. So again, in a lot of cases, you can get those things paid for, from the seller. Typically, closing costs on a normal transaction run anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000. So that's what that looks like.
Yeah, yeah. So how long does it take to get approved?
Depends. Most of the time, the approval process is dictated by the buyer. We often can approve people same day, or typically in 24 to 48 hours. If the buyer is having trouble finding some of the stuff that we need, a pay stub or a bank statement or something like that, the process can take a little bit longer. But we're fairly quick and fairly responsive. I've got a team of people working with me to help facilitate these transactions, and they're very, very quick and very responsive, very resourceful. And they can knock out pre-approvals fairly quickly. A lot of the verifications we can get electronically, like I mentioned. So if we get everything in the application and the documentation fairly quickly, that process can take maybe 24 to 48 hours max.
Okay, good. So you mentioned, or we talked about inspections. What's the difference between an inspection and an appraisal?
The appraisal is a requirement by the lender. So we're requiring that we get an appraisal on the property to, one, make sure that the house is in acceptable lending condition. I want to make sure the roof is good and the floors are there and there's no broken windows, things like that. And then the second part of that is we want to make sure that you are paying the right price for the property, that you're not overpaying for something. So that appraiser is going to go out there, do a bunch of work, get some comparable sales, that he's going to compare your purchase, your house, to that have sold recently in that area, to make sure that you're not overpaying for something. In a lot of cases, the appraisals are coming back, lately at or above purchase price. So now's a really good time. A year ago we were looking at people overpaying for house, overbidding for houses. And a lot of those appraisals, unfortunately, were coming back short of what they were paying for it. So it's good on a VA loan if you can always usually renegotiate your purchase price after we get the appraisal back. So if we get the appraisal back and it comes back for less, you have an opportunity then to go back to the seller and go, hey, my house isn't worth what you're asking for it. Can we renegotiate that? So that's kind of the idea, although the appraiser's going out there and doing a little bit of an inspection on the overall condition of the house. They're not diving deep into it like an inspector would. Inspector, the guy that you're going to hire that the buyer pays for that I mentioned costs $300, $400, $500 is going to go out there. He's going to spend like 4 hours combing through the property, looking at all the outlets. He's going to crawl up in the attic through the crawl space, take a really detailed look at the roof and all of the appliances and make sure they've been serviced lately and that they're in working condition. He's going to put together this long report of all the defects that you can also use to go back to the seller and be like, hey, look, this house is broken here. It needs a new switch here. The electrical's out of code. We need these things addressed.
It's a good negotiating point after.
Right.
Seller, you bet.
The inspection isn't required by the lender. The appraisal is. The inspection, however, is something that's very important to get done.
So is the appraisal, is a VA appraisal different from an appraisal for another kind of loan?
In some cases, it's very similar to an FHA appraisal. There are some minor differences in what's required in the process. VA, the theory is out there that VA appraisers are the toughest to get done. They require the property to be in a higher condition state than any other appraisal type. That's actually not true. FHA is the most stringent appraisal out there. Hold on 1 second. So FHA is a little more strict, the easiest being conventional, but the VA appraisers, there's only a limited number of them out there. There is a very rigorous process to become a VA appraiser that not all appraisers have their licenses to do those. So they tend to be maybe in a little bit short supply. They take a little bit longer to come back, although these days they're not overloaded at all. They come back, within a week. Usually we've been getting those VA appraisals back. So it's fairly quick at the moment. It's not very much different than any other appraisal type. There's very few things that it requires in addition to, say, a conventional appraisal. But the house has to be pretty livable. Like, there can't be broken windows. It has to have floors that are functional. We can't have giant holes in the walls, and the roof has to have at least 2 years remaining on it. Stuff like that. I mean, it's got to be fairly move-in ready, and there can't be any health and safety issues like rotted wood on decks and things like that, leaks in the roof, things that would allow exposure to the elements and mold and stuff like that. So that kind of stuff wouldn't fly.
Yeah. So there's a common misunderstanding that where the money comes from. The VA, does the VA loan money, or what's the VA or the government's role in this whole process? The VA loan, the VA up here and you're here, who does what?
The VA basically is guaranteeing the money that a regular lender would, say, loan you. If there was a default, you're coming into this house purchase with zero down, the lender is absorbing some of that risk, right? You're coming in with very little or no skin in the game when you're purchasing a house. If something happens, you exit the military and you don't have a job or anything like that, you can't make your payments on the house, you then will default, and the lender has to go through this long foreclosure process and absorb a bunch of costs and pay your property taxes and homeowners insurance for you, because they take over that collateral and then they have to sell it on the auction it off or something like that. So there's a bunch of costs and a bunch of fees that the lender has to go through. The VA guarantees that lender isn't going to take a loss, which encourages the lender then to lend you the money with zero down.
Yeah. Good point. So we talked about zero down payment. But what happens if I want to put more down maybe to get maybe to get my payment lower. Is that doable in the VA loan process?
Yep, you can come up with as much as you want down. In fact, there are some fees that the VA rolls on top of the loan, a VA funding fee, that if you do come in with a down payment, that funding fee that they tack on, their basically their cost or their insurance pool of funds in case you default, like I mentioned, that's where they get that money from. Uh, that fee is lower because why should you have to pay as much to protect or fund the
Well,
VA if
yeah,
you
yeah,
come up
more
with your
skin
own
in the
down payment?
game, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, more
there's
skin in
less
the game.
risk of taking a loss in that scenario. So they
Exactly.
drop their fee
Exactly.
pretty substantially if you do
Yeah,
come in with it.
exactly.
5% is a big number for that.
Yep, you bet. So, typically, how long does it take to close on a VA loan?
Great question. We've been closing them in 3 to 4 weeks. Not every lender out there works the same. They don't do things. They don't use the same pool of appraisers. Their processes aren't the same. But for us specifically, it's 3 to 4 weeks. I've heard of 45 to 60 days as a common closing time with other lenders out there. So just be aware, not every lender is the same, and closing times can vary.
Well, on that note, why don't you take just a couple of minutes and tell us who who you are, how long you've been doing VA loans, and who is NFM Mortgage?
Sure. NFM Lending is a huge mortgage company. They're based out of Maryland. I work in the Seattle area, out of Linwood, their Linwood Alderwood Mall office specifically. Um, I've been doing lending 15 years, specifically for this office in Linwood for the last 10 years. So I've seen a lot of loans, a lot of scenarios. I've done a ton of VA loans. I personally love VA. I get excited every time I hear somebody's in the military and they want to use their VA benefit. The loans are easier to do. You get approved for more. The success rate and the closing rate on a VA loan is really, really high. And so and oftentimes it's their first house. And so that's really exciting for me
You
as a
bet.
lender to be a part of that process and be able to make an impact and be involved in it that way. It's not as fun as your job where you get to take them out and look into houses and stuff. I have to ask for
Yeah,
documentation and whatnot,
I
but
know.
I at least get to, witness their excitement when I present them with a
Yeah,
pre-approval letter and say, here's your payment. You're pre-approved for 600,000. Have you gone and looked at houses yet? Does this meet your need? Is this payment okay for you? And they're like, yes, yes, I'm so excited. It's as much or less than what I was paying in rent or something. So like, it's for me, like making that difference, having that impact, and doing the process in a way that alleviates the stress by communicating to first time homebuyers who don't know what to expect, because that's really the most stressful part of the process, right? Like not knowing, what comes next, what do I do? Like this is the biggest purchase, the biggest thing that you're doing in your life other than marriage, like you mentioned, right? Like, so how do I handle that? What do I do? I get to help alleviate that and make a difference in
a lot
that
of fun.
transaction.
It's a lot of fun. That's probably my most favorite part of my job too.
Yes.
Um, so kind of two last questions. One is, so I guess it's the first one is, so when do I get to go house shopping? And I guess that is tied in with that approval. As soon as you're approved, then you are able to go with some kind of confidence to go out and shop for houses. I think if you go out before then and you don't know how much you're qualified for, and you get all emotionally excited about buying a house, and then you come back and find out, well, it's more than you can afford, then that's a bummer. So in my feeling, it's a lot easier to talk to Eric or to someone else to get pre-approved, so what your how much you can afford. That's why my first question was, how much house can I afford? Once you know that, and you know that you're qualified, and that the approval process is going to go smoothly, then the fun begins. Absolutely, fun begins for both of us here, for everybody. You guys get excited about looking for a home in a new neighborhood, that the beautiful Northwest, and Eric gets excited about working with a first-time home buyer, a military family, and as do I. So that's it's a win-win. The
Yeah,
last
please help
thing,
us get excited. And that's a great point, by the way. I love that you touched on that. Make sure we get the pre-approval first. There are a lot of like online payment calculators out there. A lot of them aren't accurate. They won't give you, some of them don't include taxes and insurance in the payment. Um, you're right. Like, you don't want to go spend a lot of time looking at houses just to find one you love and then realize you can't afford the payment or you're
Exactly.
not qualified for that. That makes it really depressing. We don't want
Yeah.
you to be depressed. We want to be excited and you want to be excited. We want everybody
Yeah,
excited, right?
that's
Let's
true.
just be excited.
Yeah.
And here's another important thing with that. The housing market, although it is a great time to buy, houses are still moving really quickly. And
They are.
that day that it takes to apply for the loan and upload your documentation and all that kind of stuff, the house probably won't be there by the time you get that pre-approval. And
Yeah,
then it's going to
unfortunately,
suck
that's
for you.
true.
Even if you are approved for it, even if
Yeah.
you get the payment right on magically on a payment calculator online, by the time you get your pre-approval letter, in many cases, 9 times out of 10, that house is gone. They disappear
Yep.
in days,
Yep.
literally. So set yourself up for success. Get the pre-approval done first. Cover all of those questions. Be informed about the process. Don't be wondering what's next before you ever get to that point. And then that alleviates all the stress and puts the fun into house
Yeah.
shopping.
Yeah, and one of the things that's part of this home buying process is that that you, as a first-time home buyer, working with us, there's a plan, and you know what going into it, what the steps are, and what hurdles you have to get over, and what the end result's going to be. And on that kind of leads me to the last question or statement, and that's, when do I get my keys? So I've gone through all this process. I'm excited. I've signed all the docs. The lenders approved all the docs. When do I get my keys?
That is the most important question, isn't it? So from the point where you get your offer accepted, we have you pre-approved. You go look at the house at that point. Bill is an amazing negotiator and gets your offer accepted. From that point, it usually takes 3 to 4 weeks before you're at the table signing your documentation with that escrow company that we talked about earlier. At that stage, once you sign the paperwork, usually it's next business day for the loan to quote unquote fund, for all the wires to go through the East Coast Bank, for the county to get their instructions to transfer the deed of the house from the seller's name into your name, and for that to record and basically provide a receipt. Once we have that receipt that that's been done in the state of Washington officially, that's when you meet Bill at the property and he gives you your keys and you get all excited, and we all get to celebrate together. So
Yeah, it is. It's a fun time. Well, Eric, thank you so much. I appreciate it. You've given us a lot of information, and I'm sure that those watching here today will find it very interesting and informative. Thank you so much.
absolutely. Thanks for having me, Bill.
Thanks, Eric, for that awesome interview and helping us to better understand the VA loan process and the steps in buying our first home. Down below, you'll see links for more information about the various programs, how to get in touch with Eric, how to get in touch with me when you're wanting to look for a home in this area. Yeah, just like I said, it's in the link down below. And since it's been a few weeks since we've posted a video, go back and look at some of our older videos, and I think they're also down below. They're topics like the best places to live in the JBLM area, what the VA loan, or what your benefits are like. There's 6 or 7 videos that I think you'll find very enlightening as you are considering moving to the Pacific Northwest, and one of the local PCS is here. The base is here for your PCS. Also, we very much want you to subscribe and to be able to get more information, more content like this. Also, leave a comment down below in the comment section and help us understand what your likes are, how we can better serve you. And if you want to get, like I said before, if you want to get a hold of me to get more information, about the market in this area, homes in this area, the process, etc., just one of those links down below is how to get a hold of me. My name is Bill Brown. Thank you very much, and we will see you on our next video.